Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Happy September 10th. I'm your host, C.C. O'Reilly, and I can't thank you enough for tuning in to another episode of the Saints and Alumni Show, only on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. And on today's show, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of September 11th, so we thought it would be a great idea to bring in Father Kevin Mullen, class of 1975, the 10th president of Siena College, to tell a story, a great story, of Father Michael Judge. And as we get into today's show, you'll learn a lot about his impact, not only here at Siena College, but every community he was a part of. And we tell his story of the events that happened on September 11th, 20 years ago, tomorrow. So I hope you enjoy the show. It's a different show, but I know you will love it. And we're obviously going to have Father Kevin Mullen back to tell a lot more stories because we found out there's endless amounts that we got to get uncovered for this show. So sit back, relax, enjoy your Friday, whether you're driving home or just getting out of your desk. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. You're listening to 88.3 The Saint, the station where we play anything. And welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show. I'm your host, Colin Cahill O'Reilly, class of 2012, and today we are joined by our 10th president of Siena College, Father Kevin Mullen, class of 1975. Father Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, Colin, great to be here.
It is great
to be with you.
It's always great to see you around campus, obviously. You spent a lot of time down in New York City, but now for the last year and a half, you've been here, and we're excited to have you here. You're heading back there, though, right?
I live back in the city, but always good to come back here to Siena. Always.
Absolutely. Originally from New Jersey.
Correct, right.
And then you made the trip here, and it was, at that point, too much green grass, and you couldn't get away from it.
Some people say I never left.
Exactly. Which is not a bad thing. We love having you here.
That's right.
And today is a special day because, obviously, it's the day before 9/11, and you were here on Siena College's campus 20 years ago on that fateful day, and I kind of wanted to get your perspective of what the campus environment was like when the news officially broke, and then kind of how it transpired eventually to the story of Father Michael Judge, which was obviously the first casualty recorded on 9/11. So just kind of take us back to that morning, if you don't mind.
Well, actually, I was not at Siena.
Oh, you weren't?
Happened. No. I was actually right across the river,
Really?
12 miles away in a parish.
Oh, my gosh.
In New Jersey. And the day is forever, just right in my memory. I had a funeral that morning at 10 o'clock, and it was the funeral of the mayor of the town's mother. And so it was a big funeral. And so I was getting ready, 8:30, kind of and going around, and I heard the reports of the first tower being attacked. And I was stunned, and I was in disbelief. When I heard the second, I said to myself, we are definitely at war.
Yeah.
And then the fear was I was pastor of a large parish with a big school, and many of our children had parents that worked in New York City, some of them in the towers. So the first thought was, after the funeral mass, how do we protect these kids? How do we keep them calm and safe? We went through all our standard protocols. Thankfully, everything worked. And in retrospect, we lost no one from our parish. Sadly, I lost a number of friends that were in the towers working, people I knew from other walks of life, including Siena graduates and alums that were part of it. So the day is forever, ever in my mind, and every anniversary, it's a time to pause and to give thanks to God for the goodness of those people. And I got to tell you, the one thing that has struck me over the years more and more is the people, the families, the spouses, the siblings, the parents, the friends who lost loved ones. Those relationships are forever impaired by the horror of that attack. And I think of those people, especially 20 years out, the children who grew up without parents. And it really strikes you, and it becomes, each year it's more somber, I have to say. And this year is very somber as it's 20 years. Hard to believe. But God bless those folks, the first responders. I mean, we all know all the stuff that folks did. I wish, I really do, that we could recapture the spirit of unity, the spirit of cooperation, the self-sacrifice that was evident, not just on 9/12 and after. It stayed a long, long time. It was so refreshing. And boy, we need it today.
You're absolutely right. And I was in sixth grade I was born in 1990, so the moment I remember, but from a sixth grader's perspective. So I think a lot of people born around that time that have those childhood memories kind of always still on every anniversary relive where they were, but always learn more. And I think today, especially the day before the 20th anniversary, it's important for the people that are, Siena College students weren't born when that happened. And it's a good story to tell because you're 100% right. The unity in the country for years was stronger than it has been since.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
Experience and live. Yeah.
And immediately, I think, just from what I've heard around campus on that day, it just kind of everything from possibly what you heard as well, it kind of shut down. Everybody was worried.
I think those who were here can speak to this better, but the whole campus responded. The Friars were great in terms of gathering students. Spontaneous prayer broke out. Not unlike my experience, there were students here with parents working in the building who had no idea what happened to their loved ones. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. But again, a trait of Siena College, everybody in the community pulled together. And they supported one another. And then the next question was, how do we help?
Yeah.
How do we help? And what a great legacy to have. And that legacy continues. Those are some of the stories I think we need to pass on to the generations that did not experience that. You support one another, and then you go help.
Absolutely. And the stories of people that signed up that next week and started to serve right away. They got their calling that day. The same way many people get their calling to become friars.
Yes.
It's that I know what I have to do moment, and that was universal at the time.
That was very much so. Very much so.
And we obviously lost a number of Siena alumni that day, and they were recognized on campus, not only in the Student Union where we are right now, but over in Foy Hall as well, right outside of the theater. And it's important to recognize them because there was such a response when we found out the amount of Siena alumni we lost that day. And it's great that we do recognize them in that way. There's a William Robb trading room as well.
Sure.
And, the alumni that knew these people gathered around and still celebrate these people 20 years later as well. And I always find it interesting that, when you go back, I was rereading the story of Father Michael Judge, and the last two paragraphs of that story, they say it was kind of special that he was one of the first casualties found, recorded that day. And they're saying it's a friar, but the story behind that was he was greeting people that were coming in on that day, even though there was thousands lost, but it was him being the first. And I thought that was just it makes too much sense in a way that it would happen that way.
Yeah, he was... There's a great little video clip I think is available on YouTube called "The Last Homily," and I recommend it to anyone on this anniversary. It was actually filmed on 9/10, and it was Michael at a fire station in New York City, rededicating a firehouse. And in the homily, as you look back through the lens of 9/11, in his words, he said to the firefighters, "You love this job. Don't we all love this job?" He said, "Every time that alarm goes off, we go out, and let's face it, we don't know if we're ever coming back. But we love it, and we love one another, and that's the message for us today. Go out and keep passing that." It was like Mike had a sense. I don't believe he did. I don't think anyone did.
Right.
But was he prepared? Absolutely, he was prepared. He lived that, so he was ready.
And his sister said in that same article I read, he got the best of both worlds. He grew up wanting to be a firefighter and a priest, and he ended up being both.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. He was quite an interesting character.
Now, when you first joined the friar, you joined the Friars. When did you first meet Father Michael Judge?
I met him at Siena College here when I was a freshman in 1971. He was great friends with Father Noel Fitzpatrick. They were classmates. And Father Noel, at the time, directed the Franciscan program that I was in, trying to nurture vocations to become friars. So Noel was here, and he would invite Mike up as to give us retreats, to give us talks. But also, Michael was a parish priest, and most of us aspired to do that. And so Noel had the good foresight to say, let's get good role models up here for these young guys to kind of interact with. And I remember meeting him up in North Creek. We were on a retreat up in North Creek, and he was just, winning personality. And the parish he was in East Rutherford, New Jersey, St. Joe's. And on vacations, I lived in Patterson. He would have us always over for pizza parties and a few beers and typical Siena kind of gathering. But he did a lot. He went out of his way to kind of make us feel welcome as we aspired to be friars. So from 71 on, I knew him, and over the years got to know him much better. We never lived or worked together, but we were on committees, and I would see him on a very regular basis. So yeah, I had a lot of interaction.
And he was a assistant to the president at Siena for a number of years as well. He volunteered a lot of time, but like you said, he was a parish priest.
Yep.
He spent the majority of his time in New Jersey and then down in New York City working, being a chaplain for the firehouse.
Yeah, and when he was here at Siena as the assistant to the president, there's no secret. Michael used to say this about himself. Academics was not his number one aspiration in life, and he would talk about struggling with it. But he had a touch, and it's precisely what you said, Colin. He was a good parish priest, which made him kind of like a pastor of the community, both students, administrators, and faculty. They respected him because he interacted on a personal level with them. Just a quick funny story, and it's long past, so we can't get fined for it. But he used to love to, Bill Kirsch was the basketball coach, and he used to love to get tips of who we were recruiting. And then he would go and try and meet the kid and conduct a visit. And because he was good meeting people, he would go right into the kid's home. And it was an unofficial visit. And I remember challenging him and saying, Mike, that's against NCAA rules. And that was way back then.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm just going as a pastor. He said, I'm not going there. It's from Siena.
Right.
He said, I happen to be at Siena, but I said, well, that's a good interpretation, Mike.
It's like you see a sign that says no soliciting. It's like, no, I know them. It's okay. Yeah.
I'm not even sure he got us any great ball players, but he met a lot of people.
Got into a lot of homes. Absolutely. Well, that is a great story. And actually, I'd like to hear a few more if you don't mind.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we are kind of limited on time, so we got to go to a quick break. So hang out for a second. You're listening to the Saints and Alumni Show with Father Kevin Mullen, 10th president of Siena College and class of 1975. Only on the station that really does play anything, WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host, Colin O'Reilly, class of 2012, and again, we are joined by the 10th president of Siena College, Father Kevin Mullen, class of 1975. Father Kevin, thanks again for coming on the show today.
Great to be with you again. Thank you.
And we were just wrapping up our great recruiting story from Father Michael Judge, and he loved basketball. He was a community member. He was a parish priest, but he was a presence wherever he went.
Absolutely.
I think, I personally got to know you when I first came here, but also Brother Ed. Those are the types of personalities that you kind of remember. And I never knew Father Michael Judge, but the stories you hear, there was a reason why the firehouse was named after him. And on that day, I don't know kind of how the information was being spread. It was so widely spread. And at what point did you first hear about his passing on that day?
I remember again explicitly. I had just gotten back from, I had told you, a funeral.
Right.
And it was now 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was in my room. Like everybody else, you're glued to the television. But I was also in New York. Folks would recognize this, CBS Radio 88.8, news all the time. And I had that on the side. So I had the TV going, the radio. And on the radio came this announcement. They said, we just have word from the tower that a fire chaplain was killed in the collapse of the tower. I just remember sitting there. I said, that's Mike. It's got to be Mike. And I picked up the phone, my cell phone. Surprising that it worked. But I called into the provincial headquarters at 31st Street. And I got the provincial. I didn't get the provincial. I got his secretary. I said, did you get any word on Mike Judge? And they said, yeah, did you just hear? And I said, I just heard that a fire chaplain. They said it was him. And I said, thank you. And I hung up the phone. And the first person I called was Father Hugh Hines, the 7th president of Siena, and a good friend and a great friend of Michael Judge. And Huey was in Boston, where I had been with him prior. And I said, Huey, I get some terrible news. He said, well, the whole day has been terrible. I said, well, I got to tell you, Mike was the chaplain. He said, I just heard it. He said, I thought so too. It was both of us had the same reaction, that
right.
And the reason we had that reaction is many people have talked to us about Mike. Where the action was, that's where he was.
You're right.
He was a guy geared to go to the action. And it came out later in stories that he was directly across the street. His room looks out on the fire station on 31st Street. And one of the friars came running up and told him what had happened after the second plane. And he grabbed his gear, and as the story goes, the friar was standing in the doorway. Before he ran out, he checked his hair to make sure he looked good. That was Michael. And then he went down. And there's a video of him in the command center with then Mayor Giuliani, Fire Chief Van Essen, I believe, and all the heads of the emergency services. And he was there, and the mayor turned to him and said, "I hope you're praying for us." He said, "Absolutely, that's what I'm doing." And he was there, and you saw his head bowed down, and they left.
Yeah.
And because they left, they were not killed in the collapse. He stayed.
You're right.
They went to another area and were in grave danger also. But it was that image, and when you see the video, it's kind of it's hard to watch.
Yeah. Absolutely. And especially now, 20 years later, we've mentioned that before. It's coming up tomorrow. And I think anyone who lived it will never forget it. And anyone who didn't has heard about it every year of their life. And they've only known war until this year. So It's going to be interesting moving forward how the country kind of bands together, like we talked about, looking for that type of unity that we need right now. And I think after that, it just was more and more somber news for a while. And most things didn't happen right away. Games were pushed off. The city was shut down for such a long time. But then there was this moment of, we've got the total. We know who we lost. We're clearing the rubble. And then you see the number of Siena graduates, and just every community, no matter where you are, you have a group of people that you lost. And once that happened here at Siena, I got to imagine it was just an immediate, how can we help? Like that calling for everybody.
I would say, at least in my experience, the first big event after 9/11 was Michael's funeral. And that, again, is kind of etched on my mind. It was broadcast worldwide. And we drove in, anybody familiar with the New York metro area, we drove in from New Jersey. I was with a fire company and police. We came in on Route 3. There was no traffic. That had been shut down. The Lincoln Tunnel was shut. George Washington Bridge was shut. We had a special escort down the Helix in through the tunnel by the Port Authority Police. Then we were met by NYPD on the other side. We came up 30th Street. Never in my life have I driven 30th Street without traffic. We came into an empty Midtown, absolutely empty, with just police presence, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere. The funeral was actually quite beautiful. A great homily by Father Mike Duffy. Many Siena students would have met Father Michael Duffy down in St. Francis and in Philly, those who have volunteered down there. And another great friend of Mike Judge's, and gave a homily that, again, is just one for the books to keep. But there were a lot of dignitaries there. Former President Clinton, Senator Hillary Clinton at the time, she was there. I believe the governor. The mayor was not, because he was at another funeral. But the people in attendance, and the thing that, again, will always stand out for me, as we came out of that funeral and we got into a procession back to Patterson, where he is buried, at every crossroad on the highways, the fire departments of those local communities were standing guard with the American flag and people. There was no traffic. They saluted him. The honor that was given to Michael Judge coming out, and he was, as you said, Colin, the first, number one. It was spectacular. And again, those of us who knew him were laughing, just saying, boy, would he have loved this. I mean, he couldn't have written a script, but the burial was quite moving. So it was. They were very difficult days, but there were a lot of, as with always with the friars of being human, there's a lot of fun and little quips you remember back and forth in it also.
Well, it continued, obviously, for a while for numbers of people that we ended up losing that day, but years later, he's still recognized down there, too. And I don't know what were those naming ceremonies like? When did that happen? Because I've always known it as Father Michael Judge Way,
Yeah. That happened pretty much within that first year.
Really?
Yeah, 31st Street was, I believe it was toward the end of the year after. And it may have been on the anniversary. One of the great events that takes place every year take place this year is the Sunday before 9/11. Stephen McDonald, a former NYPD detective who was unfortunately shot and paralyzed in Central Park in the 1980s or 90s. And sadly, Stephen has since passed, but he and his wife Patty and son Colin, they got together with a whole bunch of people. They have a march to the towers that begins on that Sunday with a mass at 31st Street. And then they walk down to the towers. And Stephen always led the parade. And he was in a wheelchair, but phenomenal guy and just a great ambassador for healing and peace. Michael and he went around the world as ambassadors of peace. For those who don't know Stephen McDonald's story, after he was shot, he, like the Pope John Paul II, forgave the individual that shot him and met with that individual. And Mike and he made it a point then to go to Northern Ireland. They went to Israel. They saw themselves as ambassadors of peace and reconciliation. It was a great Franciscan moment and what they did for other people. And so that's one event that continues. We'll go on this year, I'm sure. And folks come from all over.
And I've heard about it, too, from other people, just other things that I've listened to as well. I'm like, it's all the same thing. That's
and there's
interesting.
groups that forms. There's a group of people that knew Mike in Jersey. The parish is Michael's Messengers. They get his words out and share. There's popular movements among people for sainthood for Michael. I'm contacted on that regularly as the provincial. And the friar's stance right now, and has been since 9/11, is that we are way too close to this event to kind of undertake that kind of enterprise. We are confident our brother Michael's with the Lord. We know, we know he's holy. And I've said to people, and they struggle with this. It's not for us to recommend it now. It's the generation of friars ahead to see this, and that's how the process usually works. You let history settle in before you jump on it. And we're so used to getting things done on the internet overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't, this stuff.
That's a longer process.
Yeah, this is a little bit longer, but again, that's a ramification. That process is very serious for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And Siena College, we're a Catholic Franciscan liberal arts school, but Father Michael Judge, he was Franciscan, but he wasn't a Siena grad.
Right? No.
But he was very connected.
He didn't have the marks to get in.
Yeah, exactly. That's like anytime someone says, "Oh, he's going to Georgetown." Oh, couldn't get into Siena. I get it. Yeah. But we did postmostly give him an honorary degree. And were you here? Were you president at the time when
I was on the board?
Oh, okay.
I did not. I wasn't at the ceremony.
Gotcha.
And the fire. They also presented awards to the fireman who carried his body out. They received recognition from Siena. Yeah. I think that took place either the year after Mike's death. I forget exactly the year, but they were acknowledged.
Well, it's a story that gets told every year, and it's one that's a great read, and it brings you back to what we're all trying to achieve every year, and that is that sense of unity again. And I think that story is one of the best ones to read when approaching this fateful day. But before we let you go, I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing this story, because it's touchy for a lot of different people, and for people that didn't live it, it's good for them to hear it and what they went through the day of, because it doesn't seem like it was that long ago for everyone in this room right now. But would you like to add anything else about Father Michael Judge before we let you get out of the radio station today?
Yeah, I would just say, I'm grateful to everybody who supported him in his lifetime. And all of us, and I'm sure the students that knew him here and people knew him in the parishes, everybody has special memories of him. But one of the things that was very special about Michael is that when he met you, he looked right at you. You were the only person that counted in the world. He respected everybody. It didn't matter who you were, rich, poor, clean-shaven, street person. Everybody had dignity. And he looked at that person with that dignity. That's one of the lasting lessons I learned watching him as a kid here at Siena and growing up. And then he also taught us to bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up now saying, what he was embodying the message of Francis and Claire. And all of us at Siena, that's our story. That's what we're shared. So my reflection of Mike is honor him by living like he taught us to live. And can't go better than that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Father Kevin, thanks again for coming on the Saints and Alumni Show. You're probably going to be asked back for a few other stories because you got a lot of them, too.
Too many.
But I think this was one that...
Some, Colin, I can't tell.
Exactly. We'll keep those for off the radio. But this was obviously a terrific story that a lot of alumni and people that aren't alumni will just appreciate hearing. And thank you again for coming in. We'll have you back soon. And as always, you can catch the Saints and Alumni Show on WVCR 88.3 The Saint every Friday at 4:30 p.m., only on the station that really does play anything. And that station obviously is 88.3 The Saint. Have a great day. Go Saints.